Rocket Recovery is a podcast and community for those who suffer from addictive, selfish sexual behavior. If you can remember anything from our time together, think on this. You are not alone. There are many of us who have suffered and have found a solution that works. We now live happy, joyous, and free lives. We know that this may feel completely unattainable for you right now, but be assured, peace and serenity can be found in this life for you too. Rocket Recovery seeks to demystify recovery. There are simple steps to take, but a hard path to follow. We'll support you with principles, maxims, mantras to sustain you on your journey. We'll introduce you to those who will guide you. And remember, you are not alone. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Rocket Recovery Podcast. On this episode, number 1, we'll be covering an introduction to sex addiction, the addiction cycle, and questions to ask yourself to determine if you are an addict. Stay tuned. Hi, my name is Zach S. I'm the host of Rocket Recovery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to be doing a episode on Addiction 101. What is sex addiction? And why do we call it sex addiction when there's so many different forms? There are probably as many different anonymous groups that have different formats, different books even, different colors of books that cover all the different forms of sex addiction. There's Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Porn and Love Anonymous, I think it is. And then there's all of the partners of sex addicts, POSA. COSA is couples, codependence of, I can't remember exactly what it's called. Anyways, there's so many different groups that are out there and so many different forms of sex addiction. Our podcast tries to cover them all. Now, for me personally, my sex addiction was pornography, masturbation. And even by me saying those words, pornography, masturbation, those taboo words, the words that we're not supposed to be talking about at all, right? We're not supposed to say those things in polite society. Well, we're going to say those on this podcast. We're not going to shy away from technical descriptions. We might use some colloquialisms, some slang, if you will. Those that are addicts probably are aware of these things. And really what it does is it breaks down those barriers. It allows us to talk freely and openly without shame. I mean, sometimes it's really funny. Sometimes it's we get to joke around. There's an unspoken rule in it started out in Alcoholics Anonymous, but there's an unspoken rule. It's called Rule 62. If you know what this is, you'll chuckle along with me, but it's don't take yourself so goddamn serious. Now, maybe I'll need to add an explicit logo on this podcast because we may cuss a little bit. It depends on who we have on as a guest. It depends on how free I might be feeling. But yeah, don't take yourself so GD serious. This is a serious disease. It's a serious malady that afflicts our society. It needs to be taken seriously, obviously. We probably can't ever legislate this away. I mean, there's a reason why prostitution is considered the oldest career, the oldest job on the planet. Because there's always some woman, some man that's willing to sell their body, the thing that they possess, the only thing that they come into this world with, right? They're willing to sell their bodies for money, for fame, for position, whatever it might be. And so we come up against that. It's a really serious thing, um, this sex addiction thing. But it doesn't mean that we have to take it so seriously all the time and put on this long face and scowl and be mad, be sad, all that. We can be joyful. We can find the humor in our addictions. We can find hilarity in our own mishaps because it's through that bond, that commonality of experience that we all share that allows us to connect with you. That allows me, somebody that's been down this road for a little while, who still struggles every single day with temptation, with urges, to act out, to escape, to choose to not deal with, or that pull to not deal with reality in its real sense, but to run away. It's a very real thing. And so we try to use humor, lightness to talk about this. So addiction 101. What is it? What is the many forms of it? As I mentioned before, my particular form that are, as I like to call it, flavors of ice cream. It's all ice cream out there. There's so many different flavors. And yeah, before we go into the forms of sex addiction, let's talk about this too. Um, is sex addiction really an addiction? I mean, alcoholism has been recognized as an addiction by the medical society for generations. I mean, the book Alcoholics Anonymous was published. The first edition was published in 1939. Yeah, 1939, and again 1955, 76, and 2001. Four editions have gone through this, so it's been established for a long time that alcoholism is an addiction. It is an affliction of both body, mind, and spirit, and requires medical intervention in order to properly treat. Back in the day, you just threw people away into insane asylums. They called them sanitariums for your sanity because alcohol robbed you of your sanity. Um, a little bit a while after that, I'm not as familiar with the story of Narcotics Anonymous, but I'm sure that very quickly after alcoholism was deemed an addiction, a disease that needed to be treated medically, so also drug addiction was considered that as well. And unfortunately, in American society, I can't say anything for the rest of the world, but for American society, alcoholism, it's like, yeah, that needs to be treated medically. Um, but often, from a legal standpoint, if somebody is addicted to drugs and they get caught with drugs, distributing drugs, paraphernalia, part of the whole life cycle, lifestyle of narcotics addiction, if you're found with that, you're sent into jail. So it's not as well regarded as alcoholism. Uh, so different points in the spectrum, if you will. Alcoholism, definitely an addiction, can be treated medically. Let's get that taken care of. There's clinics for the treatment of alcoholism. Same thing for drug addiction. Although legally it's still considered a crime for drugs, drug use, drugs distribution, etc. They throw people away, lock the key instead of treating them. There's countries elsewhere in the world that are treating drugs as a medical condition, needing to be treated medically. Portugal is one of them. It's very good that's happening. Um, Gambling, definitely considered an addiction. There's recovery groups and help for that. That there is something measured in the brain that turns on when a gambler is triggered and he needs to go get his fix. But unlike alcoholism and drug addiction, which are substances that you abuse, gambling, overeating, and sex addiction are behavioral addictions. So the difference between a substance is that it's external to you. You drink alcohol, you inject, smoke, whatever. the drugs, right? Well, with gambling, yes, it's an activity that you conduct externally, but the motivation, the drive, the desire for it comes internally, and it's a behavior that you engage in, not necessarily a substance that you ingest. Overeating. Yes, there's a substance that you ingest, but the high that you get doesn't come from the substance. So it's still a behavioral thing. Same thing with sex. It's something that you engage in. But just like you can drink different types of alcohol, beers, wines, liquors, you can ingest different types of drugs, such as crack, cocaine, marijuana, heroin, etc. Just as there are many different types of foods that you can eat as part of your overeating addiction, the different types of gambling that you can do, sports betting, poker, blackjack, slots, etc. Same thing for sex addiction. So we've established it's a behavioral addiction. It is and it has a bunch of different flavors. There's porn and masturbation. That's probably the biggest one, the one that afflicts society at large the most. Although we'll talk a little bit about the difference between a heavy user and an addict, and being able to tell the difference between those two. Um, so there's porn and masturbation. There is abusing prostitution, uh, taking place in that illegal activity. There's public flashing. There is bestiality. There's underage sex, or just simply stalking and being a pedophile. There is compulsive, consistent addiction requiring sex from partners, multiple partners, swingers. There's all kinds of different flavors. Just like there's 31 different flavors Baskin's Robin ice cream, there are so many different flavors of every single one of our addictions. But the core of addiction is not in the behavior that you engage in. It is not the substance that you partake in. If you take a look at any of the anonymous texts that are out there, the blue book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the white book of Narcotics Anonymous, the green book of Sex Addicts Anonymous, it's all the same. There's a manifestation, a symptom of the disease, if you will, the way in which you choose to act out your behavior or partake in your substance. Getting drunk, acting out, injecting, overeating. These are all synonyms of the behavior or the substance that we partake in to get our high. And so, what we do is we consider it different flavors of ice cream, but at the core, it's still ice cream, right? So there's different external indicators that there is an addiction present. Video games could be another addiction. There's external factors involved, but the internal factor, the thing inside of us that's an addictive tendency, if you will, it's the same. There is still a hole that is inside of us. And we'll talk a little bit about that hole, how to identify what that is. See if you identify with yourself in the typical addiction cycle. And then finally, ask yourself some questions to determine if you yourself are actually an addict. Before we jump into the cycle and taking a look at that, let's take a look at what a heavy user is versus an addict. I'm going to go to a place in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous here and see if I can remember where it is while we're here on the fly. What's the difference between a heavy user, and an addict? One moment here. Let's talk about alcoholism. Oh dear. I'm probably not going to be able to find it right here. So there's the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde effect. There is the absurd and incredible tragic things that's done while you're participating in your addictive behavior. Um, you're rarely just mildly intoxicated in it. You're typically more or less insanely acting out, drunk, injecting, etc. Um, you're kind of a totally different person. There's a reason why I think it was Robert Louis Stevenson, why he wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He himself was an alcoholic, and it was almost autobiographical in how he determined and showed the difference between who he was as a real person, Dr. Jekyll, and who he was as that addict self, his Mr. Hyde, and just the huge difference between the two. So that's the difference between a normal person and an addict. Is just insane, over the top, just your addicted life, addicted, you participating in that is just, it's wildly different than who you are normally. Then there's the mild user, the one that, socially drinks, occasionally smokes some pot, looks at porn a little bit, every month or two or something like that. That sort of thing. It's just, I could take it or leave it, you know? It's not that big of a deal. It doesn't ruin my life. It's just, it's a small vice that I partake in. It's like smoking a cigar or a cigarette after you drink or something like that. It's not that big of a deal. And then you have yourself, your moderate or your heavy users. These are the ones that that drink to drink, that drink to get that sense of escape, the sense of relief. Coming home after a hard day's work and drinking a few beers. That's the moderate drinker. The heavy drinker probably just drinks a few more. But when faced with, a doctor's order saying, "Hey, you only have a little bit left to live here. You're ruining your liver by all this drinking and everything. You really need to cut it out. You don't have much longer, but you can turn it around if you do turn it around right now." And the guy hears that, the girl, the person hears that as a heavy drinker, and they're like, "Man, I really need to stop acting out." They have a significant enough, a big enough reason to stop, right? Uh, the addict doesn't have that. There is no reason big enough to stop. See, here's another thing. A little saying from AA. It says, and a heavy drinker could stop. He has the ability to stop if he just would. If he had enough willpower, he would be able to stop because of a doctor's diagnosis, being faced with a spouse leaving him, um, losing a job, kids finding out, something like that. It's a big enough reason, and it's staring him, straight on in the face, and he says, "You know what? I can't be doing this anymore. I have to stop." He would stop. He definitely could stop if he would. If he just would, he could stop. Okay? The addict, they would stop if they could. Addicts typically have tried to stop in the past. Maybe they did stop in the past because they were a heavy user because of a big enough thing. I'm faced with losing my job, so I need to stop acting out. And then that crisis passes, and they're like, "Oh, phew," wipe my brow off and continue on in my actions. And that happens a few more times. It may progress into an actual addiction where there's nothing big enough to make me stop anymore, right? So an addict has crossed that threshold, that point of no return, that point where I could stop if I just would, into I would stop. I really would. if I just could. Countless times we've had guys come into the rooms of SAA, and if you're a member of any of these other anonymous groups, you probably have heard this yourself as well. Guys come in the room and they've tried a long time to stop, and they are at the end of their rope. And this is kind of like my transition into the addiction cycle. They have sworn it off. They're like, I am never doing that again. They've hit rock bottom for one reason or another. It may have been the aforementioned things, losing a job, losing a marriage or a significant relationship in your life, being arrested, whatever it might be, that rock bottom that they might have hit. They felt that busted feeling, and they're like, I'm never going to do that again. Okay? I'm never going to do that again. And maybe they read a book, maybe they join that Reddit no-fat community and they accomplish their 90 days of no acting out, no porn or masturbation or whatever. A significant, or a minor amount of time passes, and they obtain a sense of control. They're telling themselves, I got this. It's okay. That consequence maybe wasn't as big as I thought it was. That rock bottom, it wasn't that bad. I've got this. And the pressure has come off, right? We're talking mentally, maybe external circumstances, it's still there, but mentally on the inside of that addicted person, the pressure is off. Yeah, I could take it or leave it. It's okay. And then what happens is this crazy point in an addict's person. It's called the mental blank spot. Think of it like this. We were taught from kids, don't touch the hot stove, Billy. You might get burnt. Right? Don't even go near it. You might get burnt. If you do touch it, you will get burnt. Right? And maybe we, as kids, maybe we tested that theory out. Maybe we touched the hot stove. Ouch! I got burned. Right? Touch the lid of the grill outside that our dad was doing a 4th of July picnic. We touch that. And we start crying. Mom comes out and puts our finger in ice water and stop the burning on the inside, all that sort of stuff, right? There is and we know from that point forward, I am never, ever, ever going to touch a hot stove ever again. And for the most part, unless it's accidental, we never do that again. It's burned into our very being to avoid pain like that, right? Right. In an addict, when we know the consequences and the feeling of getting busted from our acting out, right? We drink to the point of drunkenness and we black out and we wake up a day later and we don't know what we did or anything. We're completely embarrassed. Maybe there were, added consequences to it. You got somebody pregnant, you got a venereal disease, what have you. It's just like, man, holy cow, what happened right there, right? Okay, maybe you're acting out and you got caught, spouse found you out, you're sneaking away into the living room, middle of the night. They get up to go to the bathroom and they catch you, right? Oh my gosh, I got busted. Never going to do that again. Well, the mental blank spot in an addict, that connection of pain and the feeling of pain and I need to avoid that pain, it doesn't happen. That connection doesn't work. Somehow inside of our brains, that connection between, that memory, if you will, of the consequences, the extreme emotion that I felt, it's just not there anymore. And so as a consequence, I keep on going back to the hot stove and touching it, getting burnt, waiting for it to get healed up, totally forgetting that, hey, remember that last time when I touched it and I got burned? Don't do that again. I go and I touch it again. And I touch it again. And I touch it again. There's that mental blank spot. It's just the connection between me swearing it off and the consequences just isn't there anymore. And so immediately I start going into rationalizing and planning my next escapade. whatever it might be. Hey, my wife's going out of town. I'm going on a business trip myself. She's going to the store to pick up milk and eggs and everything. I got 30 minutes. What am I going to do with that 30 minutes? Um, you know, I'm alone in the office. I'm in my office. It's got a door. I can shut the door and I can do my thing. Whatever it is, I'm going to start rationalizing and planning it. Whereas a week before, you were swearing it off. I'm never going to do this again. Now, a week later, after that mental blank spot, I'm right back at it, planning what's going to happen next. And it may not be a conscious thing, it may be subconscious or whatever. But eventually in life, we get restless, we get irritable. Life happens, we're discontent, RID, restless, irritable, discontent. And I just, I it's kind of like a, a drug addict. They get the itches. I need to get my hit. I'm restless, um, whatever it might be. And so what happens is when we're in that state of restlessness, irritability, discontentedness, opportunities are always around us. But when we're in that state, we're susceptible to actually pursuing those opportunities because we know based on past experience, the effect that we sought after was really, really good. It made me feel good for a little while. And I don't remember what those consequences are anymore. So the only thing that I remember is how good it made me feel. And why should I deny myself of that? The opportunity presents itself, and you've just become completely unmanageable in your choices. You have no choice in the matter. The whole Jiminy Cricket, good cop, bad cop, angel and devil that's sitting on your shoulders, like we saw when we were kids on cartoons and everything. Will I? Won't I? No, yes, do it, don't do it, do it, don't do it. All that sort. It's not even there anymore. Of course, we're going to do it. We have this sense of self-confidence. I got this. No pressure is on me anymore. I've completely forgotten about my consequences. I've been planning my next escapade, subconsciously for the past week. I'm completely restless, irritable, and discontent because life sucks. And here's this opportunity in front of me. Of course I'm going to do it. I have no choice in the matter. I've been obsessing over this for such a long time. Of course I'm going to give in. I'm going to do it, right? So what happens? We go and do it. We seek out that effect. Oh, this feels so good. Finally, I can do it. Oh my gosh. And I act out. Whatever that acting out might be, whatever that flavor of ice cream that we were talking about is, right? We seek out that effect. And then the allergy effect comes into play. It's an allergy. It's like we get stung by a bee and we blow up. We eat peanuts and we blow up. Diabetics, it's not an allergy, but it's a symptom of a disease. Our body, starts producing insane amounts of insulin. We need to get it under control, or otherwise we're gonna pass out or anything. So we have to sick ourselves. It's that feeling of uncontrollable. This is never enough. I have to keep on going. I don't know how many times I've binged on pornography, overnight. I've woken up with the sun because I've just been looking at porn the entire time. Just other crazy things that I've done when looking at porn. I remember driving, this is a long time ago, but driving on the highway, 80 miles an hour, pornography on my phone, in the dashboard clip, and I'm masturbating 80 miles an hour down the highway. I pull off of the highway, finish it off. I mean, it just all kinds of just crazy, crazy things that I've done in order to scratch that itch, if you will. I start craving it. Just insane amounts of craving. I start binging and just going on and on and on. I have absolutely no control over myself, right? And so what's going to happen? Of course, we stay up all night. We got to go to work the next day, right? What's going to happen? I'm going to go into work. I'm going to, you know, be completely like out of it. I've had no sleep. Maybe there was a presentation that was due at work. I'm gonna Totally missed the ball on that. Um, my wife's gonna possibly go and look at my browser history, and of course, she's gonna find out what I was doing. You know, uh, uh, if I was using my work computer, of course, IT at my work is gonna know what I was doing. I mean, perhaps there was a sting, you're involved on some sort of dating app or whatever, and they were like trying to bait you into it, and they got you that way. There's going to be consequences that you're going to face. And it may not be these external consequences. It just might be a feeling of like, man, I feel like crap. Why did I do that? When you come out, come up for air, like, holy cow, what did I do? It may be an immediate, whoa, hit me in the face. It may be like a realization a little while later. It may be that somebody else has to make you aware of these consequences, but you're going to see the consequences. And you're like, man, holy cow, I'm busted here. And it may be a feeling of rock bottom for you. It may not be. It may just be, I'm not going to do that again. It was like weaker resolve this time around to swearing it off, right? I'm never going to do that again. It was just like, I won't do it like that anymore. Maybe I won't go all night. Yeah, the key here is that you've hit that rock bottom. Or maybe not, who knows? But you start swearing it off again, right? Well, I'm never going to do that again. Or maybe it's more along the lines of, I'm not going to do it in quite that way, right? Well, that's the problem. That's where we have the physical side and the mental side. The mental side, the pressure is off. I got the mental blank spot. I start rationalizing and planning, restless, irritable discontent. The opportunity comes and I say yes to it. I don't have a choice in the matter anymore. I've been obsessing about it the entire time. And then on the physical side of things, I'm seeking that effect out. I'm engaging in my behavior. The allergy takes place. I start binging on it. Consequences occur. I might feel busted. I may not. Who knows? I start swearing it off. A little time passes. I got a sense of control. Pressure is off. And you see this cycle that begins to form, right? The round and around and around, the infinity cycle. You're caught in the death loop, right? Well, there's this third part. There's this spiritual malady that's dogging us the entire time. This lack of power. Man, if I could just get out of this cycle, I certainly would, right? It- man, our lives are just characterized by that. The mental side, oh, I'm obsessing. The physical cravings that I just can't control. And the spiritual malady is just, weighing me down. I have no power over this. This is a disease. It affects us all the way in all three parts of our being. And it gets worse and worse and worse. It never gets better. It progresses. And just like alcoholics that end up, in the gutter with narcotics users that overdose, we've seen countless celebrities with their addiction issues and everything. Sex addiction is the exact same way, guys and gals. It's the exact same way. We're gonna end up dead or insane. Just no bones about it. Yeah, the effects may not be as apparent, but we're certainly heading in that direction. We have no power. So the bad news is that we're totally screwed, right? We're totally effed up. If you've ever asked yourself the question, I really want to stop. How do I stop? Do you really want to stop? The good news of this whole thing is that nobody made you do it. These are choices that you made yourself. Nobody held a gun to your head, say, do this or die, right? You made this problem yourself. It is of your own making. And that's addiction. We'll talk about the positive side of things in the next episode here, but I wanted to stop here and just talk about this three-part progressive disease. And real quickly, I wanted to address those that are religious in the room. I grew up in a Christian home, Christian background. And when I went to my spiritual leaders, the pastors at my church, they only address the physical side of things. Well, just stop acting out, distance yourself from your source of temptation. And they didn't even take into account the obsession. The problem is that the obsession is the thing that can actually be changed. You can actually be given a choice in the matter. The physical side of things, you're not going to stop it. Once that addiction is formed and once that dependency, those chemical pathways in your brain have been formed, you just go. You don't have control anymore. And so, unfortunately, the no fap community, even though it's been a fantastic introduction to the world of recovery and giving guys hope and support, and the many, many support groups that exist out there that seek to give guys support and a place for them to share their struggles and their pains that they've gone through and everything. You're only addressing a certain part of a person. You're not addressing the whole person. Physically, mentally, spiritually, we have to be addressed as a whole person. And so that's where the challenge comes in, especially to our religious members, because there's thousands and thousands of churches that are out there that each have a program of recovery, hopefully for those that, members of their congregation and their communities, um, seeking to help them with this addiction, with this problem. It's got to go deeper. It has to address the whole person. And there's a solution out there. There's simple tools. As the big book says, we lay these simple tools at your feet. It's up to you to pick them up. But sometimes you're inadequately prepared. You don't have the tools. There are groups out there, including NoFap, including most of the churches that are out there, and including some groups that are out there that exist for support. Even therapists need to be specializing in the particular addictions that they treat in order to truly help those that are in trouble to recover from their addiction. You can't address part of a person. It has to be a complete change. It has to be address the complete person. And really, the only ones that are qualified to do that are specialized therapists and other addicts. The other addicts are there for support, for accountability, for showing you how it's done on a day by day basis. And then professional help from therapists that specialize in this, that so that they can actually address the very specialized traumas and early childhood issues and formative, before the age of 8 issues that happen in people's lives in order to help them overcome this whole person problem. And so that is the addiction cycle. Lastly, I want to talk about these questions to ask yourself to help you determine, maybe are you an addict? And maybe you've listened to what I've discussed up to this point, this foundational addiction 101 of the cycle and what it is. And maybe you identify with parts or all of this cycle. You see this and you're like, man, I'm in here. This is me. I can see it. I can see where I've sworn it off, and a couple weeks later I have this complete sense of control and I have no pressure on me anymore. I have almost allergically responded to my to these temptations and gone after it and binged maybe all night. Maybe some of these stories have resonated with you. You may be an addict if that's the case, and we encourage you to go seek help from those that specialize in it, from a therapist. There's tests that you can take. I think I've taken like 150 question test before, answer, and they come back with a diagnosis. um but here's a very simple test for you. Two very simple questions to ask yourself to help you determine if you're an addict. First off, if when you honestly want to stop, you find that you cannot quit entirely, it's like what we talked about before. I would stop if I just could. If you have tried to stop in the past multiple times, dozens of times, and you find I just can't quit it entirely. I get halfway there, most of the way there, but I just can't stop. You might just be an addict. Number two, if when you are acting out, you try to moderate that behavior in the midst of it and find that you can't, that you don't have any control. All right, I'm only going to look for pictures of celebrities in bikinis, not naked celebrities, right? Or I'm only going to look at the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. I'm not going to go and look at videos, you know? Uh, I'm only going to masturbate in the shower, not anywhere else. Whatever these tests that you've run for yourself, have you ever done that? And if you haven't done that, try it. Please try it. You know, if when you're acting out, you have little control over the amount that you act out, you're probably an addict as well. You may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And we'll talk about that spiritual experience. We'll talk about the good news in the next episode. So that was Addiction 101 for today. I thank you for joining me on this journey as we've discussed what is addiction. I hope that you have benefited from this. Please leave comments, leave a rating on Apple Podcasts. Let us know how much you appreciate that. We're on Anchor. You can leave comments on Anchor FM, Anchor FM /Rocket Recovery. And of course, we're all on the socials. Just search for Rocket Recovery as well. This has been Zach S. Thank you so much for listening today, guys. Have a great day. Bye. You've been listening to the Rocket Recovery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Catch up on our socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. Thank you again for supporting us. Please make sure that you subscribe, like, and share with all of your friends, all those that you know that need to hear this message of hope, recovery, joyfulness, freedom, abundance, clarity, all of the above. Thank you so much.